Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial for accessing the Hajj data on GCP. My name is Saleh and I'm working as a cloud consultant for iSolutions, who are a premier Google partner. And basically my work is all about focusing on G Suite and how to expand the G Suite platform to meet the customer's needs and requirements. I've been doing a lot of customizations using Google APIs and the app script and app maker as well. And recently I started doing the same work also on GCP, on Google Cloud Platform, in order to make the transition and the migration for the customers as smooth as possible and as easy as possible, which will help them explore the awesome platform and the awesome products that are offered by Google on both G Suite and Google Cloud Platform. So in these few minutes, I will try to give you an idea and information and resources on how to access and what to use in order to access the Hajj data that is going to be stored on Google Cloud Platform. Also, I will give you a very high level and a general idea also about the other services and products that are available on Google Cloud Platform or G Suite. In specific to this topic, we're going to talk about two products or two services. The first one is BigQuery and the other one is called Data Studio. These two services and products are going to be used to host and store the Hajj data that you are going to use in the hackathon. So without further delay, let's jump to our first topic here, which is just a general look on what is GCP and what are the available services in GCP. So basically I can describe GCP as an awesome, scalable, resilient and a massive service and infrastructure that Google have. Basically GCP is the same infrastructure that runs Google. If you look at Gmail, you will find it is using Bigtable as its database, and if you look at Google Maps also you'll find that it's using Bigtable as its database. So all of the services and products and applications that Google have are using the GCP platform, which is the same platform that is offered to us as customers and consumers and developers to put our applications and infrastructure on it as well. So as an example of how scalable and how flexible Google Cloud Platform is, I have an example here for you to show, which is from Pokemon Go, and I'm sure many of you have heard about this and actually saw the information and the news about Pokemon Go when it was launched. So Pokemon Go is hosted on GCP and they're having their backends as Kubernetes engine, I believe, on GCP. And at the moment of the launch, those guys put an expectation to themselves about the traffic and the load that is going to hit them. And then they put a worst case scenario for this load and traffic as well. However, at the launching time, they were hit with 50 times more load and more traffic than they originally anticipated. And basically and simply and very flexibly, GCP just scaled up the services and the infrastructure to meet this load and this traffic that is coming and hitting them. And basically this chart here will show you the scenario and the case of what was going on. So you see the massive difference between what actual traffic they had and what expectations were set by the guys at Pokemon Go. So just imagine this massive scale in the transactions on the database that they had. And this is only on the database actually, the transactions for the data store only. So basically GCP is offering infrastructure as a service and platform as a service and database services as well. And basically I'm mentioning database services separately here, even though they can be classified as platform as a service, because actually we're focusing on database here. We're going to take a look on two main offerings in the database services in GCP. One of them is BigQuery and the other one is Data Studio. So in the infrastructure as a service, we get the compute engine, and this offering or this service will let you manage your virtual machines and manage your own instances on Google's own infrastructure and on Google's own hardware. So you get to manage the instance operating system, you get to manage your custom images, you get to manage your own licenses if you want. It can be used as well if you have custom requirements for your own development environment and your own runtimes or your own applications, for example, that you cannot find any managed service on GCP to do your requirements on. So in this case, you will just use Compute Engine, create your own virtual machine and do whatever you want on it. You can configure auto-scaling for your different workloads, and you can also distribute the services across multiple regions and zones. And if you want to get less management overhead, or if you want to get less ops, then you can get a little bit higher in the ladder and you can go to the App Engine or the Kubernetes Engine, which are the platform as a service. The Kubernetes engine actually is something between infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, because it allows you some management while puts other management aspects on Google's side. So this way you can share the management with Google, but focus more on your development and deployment and testing and all of the related works that comes with your application management lifecycle. So the Kubernetes engine is basically a great solution for you to deploy your applications and solutions in containerized environment while having the benefits of reduced operations, and at the same time you have the power of the compute engine and the automatic scale up and scale down and the load balancing as well. Now if you want to further reduce the management or the operations overhead on you and focus more in your application development and deployment and testing, you can go up to the App Engine, which actually lets you focus completely on your development work and testing and all of that, while keeping the management of the underlying infrastructure completely on Google's side. So for the App Engine, you can just select your runtime and basically you push your code to the App Engine and that's it. You keep writing code and you keep pushing the code to the App Engine and Google will take care of the rest with you. The App Engine will also provide auto scale up and auto scale down for you as well. So if you have your application is deployed on the App Engine and suddenly you get a spike in the traffic or the load or the transactions that are hitting your application, then Google will automatically scale up your application to meet the incoming load and traffic. So it's really flexible and great solution when you do not need or when you do not have the requirements to manage the environment and the infrastructure by yourself. You just use the App Engine to keep focusing on your application and deployments. And of course, as I mentioned, we have the database offering, the database and storage offerings as well. So in the database offerings, we have the Cloud SQL, which is the service for relational databases. We have also the Cloud Spanner, which is also for relational databases and horizontally scalable. For the NoSQL databases, we have the Data Store and Bigtable, and those are very scalable and can take massive amount of data. Also, we have the BigQuery as the data warehouse solution, which is actually the one that we're going to use to upload the data for the hackathon on it. In BigQuery, basically, you can do SQL queries on massive amount of data, and then you can export this query to Data Studio, for example, for visualization or other platform that can visualize the data for you. You can use the APIs and you can use the SDK commands and all of these. So you get a lot of flexible ways to work with the data on BigQuery and then do the analysis or the visualization that you want. Machine learning also comes in handy along the data offerings because you can feed it a lot of data and information, and then you can have automated and AI assisted results in your application later on. So now moving to BigQuery, and in the BigQuery we have 4 points. First, we'll have an overview, and after this, it's also just general high-level talk on what we need to do in order to start using BigQuery, and then the methods to access BigQuery. After that, we'll go to the demo, and I'll show you 3 demos. The first one, we'll see the web interface, how we can access from the web interface, how we can create a new dataset, how we can query the dataset as well. After this, I will take you to the command line and we'll be using the SDK and the BQ command, which is shortcut for BigQuery. After that, I will take you to the APIs and I will show you the available APIs and the calls and the references that you can use from within your own applications and what you need to do in order to authorize these APIs and how to call them and use them in your applications. So first of all, let me talk about why we choose BigQuery to host the data for the hackathon. Basically, the two reasons and the main reasons for this choice, because it's a data warehouse service and it's a very massive and a scalable data warehouse service. And from the demos, you will see the available public datasets that you can use and that are available, and you can query them in matter of seconds to get a large amount of data processed and then get the output that you desire. Basically, this is the second reason as well. The scalability and the way that BigQuery handles your queries and your requirements. If you compare it to any on-premise system or any data warehouse solution, you will not be able to get the same performance that you're getting on GCP and on Google's platform. We have the infrastructure, which is Google's platform. We have the tools, which is BigQuery and Data Studio as well. All you have to do is we need to upload the data to BigQuery and basically we are done. You just go ahead and query the data with the whatever query that you want. You will be able to get the data either in a view in front of you, or you can take the data to Data Studio, or you can export and download the data as CSV file and you can start working on it and feed it to your application in case you needed to do that. So in order to use BigQuery, basically you need to have a Google account, whether Gmail or G Suite or Google Identity or whatever account that is Google account. Then you need first to create the dataset in case you did not have that created already. After this, you need to load or import the data to this dataset, and you have multiple choices to do this. You can get your data from a CSV file, or you can get it from a Google Sheet, or you can get it from another table or database. There are a lot of ways and a lot of methods that you can get the data from, and even you can get it from Google Drive as well or Google Cloud Storage. So once you load or once you import the data to your dataset, you can have BigQuery to automatically identify the structure or the schema of your database or table or data, or you can manually identify or select the fields that you have and then creating your own custom schema and structure. Once your structure and schema is ready, then you can start using the standard SQL queries to query the database or the data that you have imported into BigQuery. Once you get the result, then you can either choose to get the data on CSV format or actually import it to Data Studio. And then on Data Studio, you can visualize it with charts or statistics or whatever views that you want to give to your users. Or if you want to see the data for yourself in order to take decisions or build some workflows and so on. And to get inside BigQuery, basically you have three methods. Or to use BigQuery, you have three methods of this. Basically, you can use the web UI, or you can use the SDK, which is a command called BQ, short for BigQuery, or you can use the APIs. You can do a lot with the APIs actually. You can create datasets, you can create tables inside the datasets, and you can query the data that is inside the tables and so on. So for the demos, as I mentioned in the beginning of this section, I will have three demos for you. The first one is just in the web UI, where you will be able to see the UI and how we can work with the data and how to do query from the UI itself. After this, I will take you to the command line and then we'll see the API. Now, before we go to the demos, I will be working with the available public data because actually we haven't been able to get the data yet as of now to the BigQuery. So the actual data is still not there, but there are the sample data and the public data that is available for us to work with. So I will actually do the demos on these, and you can actually do and explore on your own as well using the public data sets that are available in BigQuery. Also, another note that There are some limitations for the SQL queries. I'll be putting a link for those limitations in the resources document for you. So it's good that you check those limitations to make sure that you do not execute any failed SQL call or any failed SQL query and then you end up with an error or no result at all. So let's start with the first demo and to see the web UI. And to get to this interface, you have to go to console.cloud.google.com, and then in the products menu on the left side, you just go to the big data group and you'll find BigQuery on the top. So once you go to BigQuery, you will be able actually to see your datasets. You notice here the BigQuery public data. This one is the public dataset and it's not visible by default if you go to the BigQuery in the menu. So you have to go to it through another URL, and once you open the URL, you will be able to see the BigQuery public data. Now before you go into querying and SQL statements and all of this, I just want to show you quickly how you can create a dataset and then how you can import your own data to BigQuery. So simply I will select the project that I'm actually working on, and after this I will click create a dataset. Then I will just supply a name for this dataset. For example, dataset for. Then I get to choose the data location. I'm going to keep it to the default, and I'm going to accept the other default option, and I will click create dataset. Once I create the dataset, I need then to create a table inside it to put the data inside that table. So I will go to that dataset. Inside this dataset, I will create a table. So I'll click create table. I get to choose what type of this table or the source of this table. So the create table from selection menu gives me the option to either create the table from data that exists in Google Cloud Storage, or by uploading a file, or by selecting a file from my Google Drive. So for this, let me actually find a file on my Google Drive and then select it as the data table or the table for this dataset. So I've selected a CSV file that contains some data from my Google Drive, and the file format actually is a CSV file, so I can set it to a CSV file, and you see the different formats that you can use in here. So for my case, it's a CSV file. Then I get to set the name for the destination table. So I will type, for example, data table 1. I'm not sure if I will be allowed to use this name or not. Yes. And I get to choose to automatically detect the schema if I am sure about the headers of my CSV file. Otherwise, I can actually create the fields and map them one by one. For example, header, and then I set the value or the type of this field and the mode, either is required or repeated or whatever. Now my file is well organized and all of that, so I will choose to automatically detect the schema. And there is nothing really in the advanced options. I don't want to change this option, so I will just click create table. And that's it. The table has been created. So what I have just did is I have actually imported about 4,300 something rows to the BigQuery, to the table. And if I expand the dataset and then check the table, I can see the various columns that I have inside this table. So I have the message ID, the start date in it. This is actually a log file that I have exported from G Suite. It's a log file for email log search that I had exported from G Suite. So it gives me various information and details about the transactions and the logs for email messages incoming and outgoing, that include the message size, the subject, the direction, the recipient address, and the sender address, and all of that. So I want actually to query the field called event target, and this field actually has some default values in it, and I want to know how many rows I have for the event target called SMTP out. So simply I will just type a normal or a standard SQL query to get the data that I want, and the only difference here is the way that I type the table name that I want to run the query on. So for example, I want to select, and then I will type the table name. First I will start with the project, and then I will go down to the dataset, and after this to the table. So it means that I need to type the project name, which is iSolutions -1384, then dot, and then the name of the dataset, which is called dataset for hackathon, and then dot the table name. Then I will type the condition where event target equals, and here it is called SMTP underscore out, and that's it. All I have to do is I'll click run query, and you see now I will get the count for these values. So I have 1619 rows that have the event target of SMTP out. As I mentioned, you can save the query as CSV, or you can download it as JSON, for example. You can even export it to Google Sheets or to a database table as well. So this is actually how you create a dataset, and how you create a table, and how you import your data into BigQuery and then start querying. These are very standard SQL queries. And this process is actually the same for the public data. However, for the public data, you have a lot of data to work with. So if you go to the public data set and, for example, pick something from here. I've been experimenting before with the names, United States names, USA names, or I'm not sure exactly about, yeah, USA names. So this one contains the database for the names in the United States from 1910 until 2013. So let's see how we can query, for example, the count of people who have a specific name. So let's remove this query. Now for this case, we need to type the project name as I mentioned earlier. So the project name in this case is BigQuery-public-data. Then dot, then the dataset name, which is USA underscore names. And then I want to select the table, which is called USA 1910-2013. Now I want to know the name field or the name column, which is actually name only. So we'll type with name equals, I'm gonna try to find, for example, let's type James. So I want to know how many people with the name James in the United States between 1910 and 2013. So all I have to do is I'll click run query. You see now the processing time is ticking, so it took about 1.4 seconds and it processed 41 MB of data. So this is the result that we have in the dataset. So yeah, these are just samples for how you can do the queries, and I want to move next to the command line, and I want to show you the commands in the Cloud SDK, what you can use and how you can query the BigQuery using the BQ command. For this, you will have to have the Google Cloud SDK installed on your computer or on the machine that you're going to use. The installation is a very simple and straightforward process. You have to go to the Cloud SDK page, which is this one, cloud.google.com/sdk/install. And if you scroll down a little bit, you will see the installation options, and depending on your operating system, you choose one of these. For my case, I'm going to actually choose the interactive installer, and then I'll scroll to the Windows and I'll click the download. Then we'll start the setup. As you can see, it's a straightforward setup. There are no complications or anything. So the setup is complete. We'll click next, and it depends on you if you want to do any of these options. I'm going to run the Cloud SDK shell now, so I can walk you through with the process to use the BQ command to run BigQuery. So it's asking me now to log in to my account in order to authenticate and start using the services that are in our GCP console. So I get to accept the permissions, click allow, and that's it. I am authenticated with the Google Cloud SDK. So I need to select the project that I'm going to use. I'm going to select the appropriate project here. And then it's asking me if I want to configure the compute region and zone. I'm not interested in this now. So that's it. We'll type BQ. You see the arguments that are related to BQ, which is BigQuery. There's a lot of output in here actually. So once the installation for the Google Cloud SDK shell is complete, or the Google Cloud SDK package is complete, the Google Cloud SDK shell will open for you and it will ask you to initiate the connection or the authentication to the Google Cloud platform. Once you log in and once you authorize it, then you will be able to start using the SDK shell. But if you want to use the BigQuery command, you will be asked to provide credentials again. So once you select the project that you want to work with, you can simply start using the BigQuery. And for this case, I want to query the USA names dataset. I want to find out the number of the users who are having the name John, but I want to query the table called USA 1910 current. Previously, I have queried the 1910-2013. Now I'm going to query the next one. So I just want to confirm the field name or the column name, which is the same, which is name. And I want to go back to the shell, and then let's type the query. So BQ query. And before you complete the query in here, there is an important note that you need to be aware about, which is if you want to type standard SQL queries in the command line in the Google Cloud SDK shell, there is one flag that you need to make sure it is typed in the command, which is called use legacy SQL equals false. You need to make sure that this flag is existing after the query command. If you type it before the query in here, it will give you an error. It will not execute the query for you at all. So you need to make sure that use legacy SQL equals false is presented after the query command. Once you do that, then we'll be ready to type our query. And as I mentioned, I want to select the count. The same format for the dataset name, which is the project name. And then USA underscore names, and then the table name, which is USA underscore 1910 underscore current. Then I want the condition, which is where name equals, and I want to know about any user who is having the name of, or any person with the name of John. And that's it. Once I press enter, the query will be executed. So basically, this is the way you can use the BigQuery from the command line from the Cloud SDK shell. You can type whatever query that you want from this interface, and as long as you are having this flag in the query, you should be fine. Now I'll move to the APIs talk. Basically, for the APIs, you need to know how to import or call the APIs in your application, what are the required libraries to be used, and how to authenticate and authorize your application to use the API and all of these. And in order to use the API, you have to follow some guidelines or some rules in your application in order to load the API to your application and authenticate your application to be able to use the API as well. So while all of the details are available in the documentation, I would like to walk you through the process on how you can get started with the API, how you can load it to your application, how you can authenticate. I won't be able to get into specifics or details really, because this depends on the language and the environment that you're using. So you'll take the provided examples as a reference and then build on them. And the process is not complicated at all. It follows an easy concept. First, you have to get the credentials file. Then you have to build the service, which is, for example, BigQuery in our case. And after this, you authenticate the service, and after this you can start using the service to do queries and or creating datasets or tables. So this is the documentation for the BigQuery API, and basically all of the information and whatever you think about of information, you will be able to find it in here. So this page is on cloud.google.com/bigquery/docs. You'll land on this same page and you will find the documentation that are related to the APIs in the left side menu. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see APIs and reference. And all you have to do is you actually open the client libraries and you'll be presented with the available client libraries for BigQuery. And basically most of the common languages are covered. So you see here we have the .NET. You can use even VB.NET in here, and you can use PHP, Python, and Ruby, Go, and even Java. So most of the languages are already covered, and all you have to do is you bring the API to your application, you bring the library to your application, and then you start with the authentication, and then after this you will be able to use it to do queries and all of that. Now, talking about the authentication, and because this is the first step that you actually have to do, I want to walk you through the service account creation and setup, because it's not something you actually do from your application. You have to go to the Cloud Console, and from there you create the service account. And the process of creating a service account itself is not complicated at all. All you have to do is create the service account, enable the required API to this service account, and then you will get either a JSON file or a P12 file. Of course, the JSON is much better, but in case you needed to use the P12 file format, you'll be able to get it from the Cloud Console. So I will go to the Cloud Console now. So this is the Cloud Console, and to get to the service accounts, you have to go to the I am an admin, and then you open the service accounts page. From there, you will be able to manage your service accounts. You can create your own service accounts or generate keys for existing service accounts as well. So all you have to do is you click create service account, and then you type the name for the service account. After this, you need to choose the private key that you need to use, whether a JSON or P12, and that's it. Once you click save, the service account will be downloaded. So this is the JSON file that I have just created. And you need another bit of information for the service account, which is the service account email, and you will find this in the same view in the service accounts. And if you notice, this is the service account email, so you might need this in your application in case you're using P12 file format. So you can get this from here. So once you have this service account, then you can go to your application, to the code of your application, and then supply it to the service which you have created. And as I mentioned, I won't be able to get into specifics, but I have some samples in Python and Java on the way that the code will look like if you want to use the service account to authenticate your application. This is a sample for the way to authenticate in Java, and as you notice, a P12 file is being used in this sample. This is the sample for Python, and again there is a P12 file in use. So the authentication process is not complicated at all. There are guidelines that are provided for you by Google, and basically they will tell you what calls or what to do in general, and then they'll provide basically some general samples on how to use or how to authenticate your application. And to find this information, we'll go back to the API documentation, and there is a section in the BigQuery API basics in the authentication called authenticating using a service account key file. Basically, if you scroll down, you will see that they have provided the guidelines for you in .NET, Java, and Python. I think they provided the code or some samples in Java, and this one is using a JSON file, so you can actually use the JSON files, and this one is for Python as well, it's using JSON file. The .NET, however, they give you the general guidelines, the general idea what you need to do. So you have to load the credentials from the JSON file using the from stream call. And then once you actually create the credentials object, you pass it to the BigQuery client object. So yeah, this is the basic method for doing this. When it comes to implementing this, there are some samples provided for you and all of this. So if you want to find more details on the authentication process, whether for Java or for Python or even for .NET, you can actually go to the general authentication section in the API's documentation, and basically this is the link for it. So if you go to it, so if you want to see the sample to retrieve the credentials from the JSON file, I think we can scroll down to the second sample. So this is the sample where you can retrieve the service account file or the credentials from the service account file. So you define the credentials and then you set the path to the credentials file, and after this you retrieve and start authenticating and all of this. Of course, as I mentioned, there are the samples for most of the languages. You have the Go, Java, Node.js, PHP, Python, and Ruby. So I think those will cover most of the languages that are used. You have the option also to use the REST APIs in case you do not want to rely on a specific language. So there is a reference for the REST APIs as well. And for the data queries and the way you can query the data from the APIs, if you want to find more information and details also, you can scroll in the index or the table of content. In the how-to guides, you find a section called Querying BigQuery Data. This one will give you the information and the details that you need to know about how to query and how to use the queries in the APIs. So you can just go through the details in here, and basically all the details that you need will be provided for you. And as an example, if you want to go to the interactive queries, for example, you see the ways that we can query the data using the web UI, the command line. I already showed you both ways. And in the API, you see the supported languages, .NET, Go, Java, and even you can have more like Python, PHP, Node.js, and Ruby. So you just pick the language that you want, and you will find the structure or the general idea on how your query should be and how you should write the code for the query. You can take this and build on it. You can also modify it the way you want to meet your need and the use case in your application. One final word of advice, it's not something new or anything, but I really encourage you and I really recommend that you read as much as you can on this documentation, and you might want to focus on what you need specifically from the APIs first, but it's a good idea to read also in other areas or on other information in the API, because there are a lot of information that might help you and you might not be aware of them. So basically get what you want from here and get the samples that are provided for you, modify them, build on them, and then try to expand a little bit and see what more you can do with the API, what more functions you can achieve, and what tasks you can make it easier or faster using the APIs if you want. Because if you are using the APIs, then you can do most of the actions and activities that you can do using the web UI. So hopefully I was able to give you a good idea about BigQuery and how to use or how to access the data that is stored in BigQuery and how to query them. Again, I wasn't able to get into specifics about the languages, although there are samples that are provided for you, so you can take those samples and build and expand on them. I'll make sure to have the links for those important pages in the reference document also. And finally, for this session, there is the Data Studio. Data Studio is basically a data visualization tool. So you will feed it with data. You will add a data set or table or whatever data collection that you have, and then you can visualize it with charts and filter it and do whatever report and dashboard that you want with it. So first of all, in order to use the Data Studio, you will need to create a data source into Data Studio. You'll have to actually do a new project first, and then you have to add a data source to this. The data source can be either from BigQuery or from your own data source as CSV file or table or whatever data source that you have. I'm going to show you how to do it from a BigQuery source and also from a CSV file source. Then you add those sources and you make sure that you have the values or the data types for the fields correctly mapped. After this, you can start creating your own dashboard and your own data visualization. Now to access Data Studio, you have to go to datastudio.google.com. Once you open it, you'll be presented with the dashboard. So all you have to do is you basically create a new project or a new report. So we'll click blank. And let me put a name for this first. So at the beginning, it's going to ask you to add a data source, and basically you get to select one of the previous data sources that you have used, and I have been using some samples previously. Or you can actually create your own data source in here. So I will click create new data source, and it's going to ask me what is the source or from where I want to bring this data. For the case that we have, I will choose BigQuery. Note also you can upload a CSV file. I will show you this option later on. So you click the BigQuery option, then it asks you to select the source or the data set that you have. So for this case, I will use one of the public data sets, and I will select this project. Then I will select the Chicago taxi trips, and I will select the taxi trips table. I will click connect. This page will let you configure the fields and change the type of the fields that you have brought from your data source. So you get to change, for example, the type, whether to be numeric or currency for this field, or whether this one is text or numeric or date and time and boolean, and so on. So once you are basically done with the checking or the modification of these, all of these fields, you can just go ahead and click add to report. I'm not going to change anything here. Now this is just a warning or a notification that I'm adding data source to the report, so that's fine. Then that's it. All I have to do is now I can drag the objects from the top bar here to create the report and the visualization that I want. So I can do a pie chart in here, and then I can change the range and dimension and all of that. So for example, I want to change the dimension to make it, for example, the payment type. You can also do some date range filters also. So you can add the date range control in here, and you can select or you can limit the values for the report or for the dashboard or the charts based on specific date range. You can also add a control for the filter. So you can choose to filter the data based on the pickup location or maybe something else that you choose from here. So maybe I want to filter the data based on the company as well. And you can add also table to get a raw view for the data if you want. So this is an aggregate. So this is an aggregate for the pickup locations. So the idea is basically it's whenever you add a data source to the Data Studio project or report, it's very simple to create your own visualization and dashboard and all of this. There is a nice feature also, which is the geo. Basically, this will convert the coordinates to locations on map. But unfortunately for this data type or for this sample of data, it's not going to work, because you notice the pickup location is not exactly a coordinates data. It's a coordinate, but there is the point, this text in the beginning, so it's not going to read, it's not going to identify it. So if you wanted to use the coordinates, if you want to use the latitude and longitude coordinates, just make sure that the data in the correct format. And if you have one of the columns that contains this data and you forgot to change its type to geo in the beginning when you were adding the data source, simply you can go to resources, and then you can go to manage added data sources, and from here you click edit to manage this data source, and you will be presented with the data types again, or the field types again, so you can change the type of whatever field that you want to change. For example, the pickup location is set to text, but if I'm assuming that it contains coordinates, then I can click the menu here and I can go to geo, and then I can change it to longitude and latitude. If it was having a city name, for example, I can set it to a city, or if it has a name for country, I can set it to country, and so on. So once I set it to longitude and latitude, I click done. Now I'm going to get an error here, I assume. So if I add the geo control, you see it's not going to read anything. It's automatically mapped to the dimension with the proper data type, if I can say this. So if we open the dimensions, you will see that it's automatically seeing the pickup location, because the pickup location is the dimension or the field that we set its data type to geo, but unfortunately the data inside it are not in proper format, so that's why it's not going to read it. So you can also add text fields, and you can add images and all of that. So now once you are done with the creation of your data and your dashboard, you can either embed the report in an HTML iframe, so you can have it displayed in other locations. Also, you can view the report directly from here, and you can add people to this report, or basically you can share this report. So you type the name for the person, and for example, he's my colleague. So, and you choose to give him the privileges to this report or this dashboard. He can edit or he can view only. Of course, if you wanted somebody to only view, then you'll just give him view, and you'll send this report to him. Now he can log in and see the report, and he can filter it and all of this. So this is for the way to add a report or to create a report from a data source on BigQuery. However, if you wanted to create your report from a CSV file, for example, you can add multiple data sources to one report. So if you go to resources, then manage added data resources, then we'll click add a data source. Basically we'll click file upload. So I'm just going to find a CSV file and I'm going to upload it here. So just a few seconds and I'll be ready. So I have uploaded a CSV file that I have generated from doing an email log search in G Suite Admin Console. This CSV file contains email transactions, basically incoming and outgoing emails, and the status of each transaction, whether delivered or rejected or bounced or dropped, and the direction also, SMTP in, SMTP out, and all of this. Now this file contains some data that I can't show you, so I'm not going to demonstrate all of the fields and all of the functions on this. However, I want to query again a field called event target, which contains some values, whether SMTP in, SMTP out, and so on. So I will click connect, and you see I'm basically fine with the values of these fields, because most of them actually text, they contain letters and numbers. So I'll click add to report, and again I'm fine with this warning. Then I'm just going to add a new page so I can work on the new data source, and I will click, for example, pie chart. Now these are message IDs, but I don't want to have the message IDs here. I want to get the event date, the event target, which is down here. So you see the values that I have, none, which are actually 71% of the values. Then I have SMTP in, SMTP out, and so on. Now again, if I wanted to share this report to someone else in my team or somebody outside of my organization, I can simply go to the share the report button, And I can share it also with another colleague of mine whose name is Ahmed Younes. So I will give him edit access this time because he might need to change some report or something. So we'll click send, and that's it. So by now he will get the invitation and he will log into the dashboard or the Data Studio report, and he will be able to make changes and do whatever he wants in the report. So I hope I was able to provide some useful content, and I hope I was able to give you the information that you need to be able to start using the services and the tools that we have at hand for you. And this is a link. If you scan this code or if you go to the link down here, you will find resources about how you can use the BigQuery APIs and the reference for the BigQuery APIs as well. And then you can find links for some information about Data Studio if you are interested. For the Data Studio, basically it's all about visualization, so I don't think there are any coding or anything involved in it. You just need to know the controls that you can have, the options and the capabilities of Data Studio. And I can tell you that Data Studio it's a very capable tool, and it's a very awesome tool that you can do whatever you want with it. And then also, I did not talk about machine learning, but machine learning is in the big data offerings in Google. So I will put some information and some resources for the machine learning and how you can use the APIs as well in case you wanted to use the machine learning in your applications and development. And finally, I will put also some resources for the Google Cloud SDK, how you can download and what are the available commands for the command line tool. And at the end also, if you have any question or if you have any problem or if you have anything, I would be very happy and I would really welcome any one of you to communicate with me and reach out to me about anything or any problem or any questions that you have. This is my email. You can either email me or chat with me on Hangouts. So thank you very much. I hope I was able to deliver the required information for you to get started with BigQuery and Data Studio. I hope that was informative for you, and I hope that was helpful for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.